What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and today I am here to examine an issue of the X-Men. Specifically, I will be examining X-Men issue 11, written by Stan Lee, with pencils by Jack Kirby, inks by Chick Stone, and lettering by Art Simek. This issue introduces the Stranger, a new character who has unusual abilities. He can walk on air, he can walk through walls, he can change his size. We don't really know a whole lot about the Stranger at first. He's walking through town and he says, "This is taking too long," so he just floats up into the air and starts walking on air, and several people are very amazed by this, and rightly so. And then he accidentally walks right into the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Mutants. And meanwhile, the X-Men, they sense that there is a new being out there with some incredible powers, so incredible that it actually breaks the machine that Professor X is using to find this being. It's not Cerebro, it's something else. It's like an image spectrograph machine thing, and anyway, they're not able to find this person on this machine because his powers are so great. So the X-Men go out there trying to find the Stranger. Little do they know that he's actually already met the Brotherhood of Mutants. And if you had never read this issue before, or if you don't know anything about this issue, you might think this is kind of business as usual and that we've seen this sort of plot before. There have been two issues already where Magneto tries to recruit a new member into the Brotherhood of Mutants. Namor and the Blob. We've had two issues where both of them almost join the Brotherhood, and then for whatever reason it doesn't work out. In both cases, usually it's because Magneto is kind of an egomaniac and a little bit pig-headed and thinks that he can get away with stuff that most people wouldn't try to get away with, like shooting a missile at his new member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, and then that backfires on him and it doesn't really work out. Stuff like that where he tries to expand the ranks of the Brotherhood and it doesn't work out for him. You might think that that's the direction that this issue is going to take when you first start reading it, and that certainly is where they want you to think that things are going. Magneto asks the Stranger 2 or 3 times to join him, and the Stranger doesn't really seem that interested in joining Magneto, and then when the X-Men find Magneto and the Brotherhood and the Stranger, a fight ensues between the Brotherhood and the X-Men, and then the Stranger basically just decides he's had enough, and so he starts to teleport out of there, and then Magneto and Toad join him in his little cyclone shield thing that he has, so that they can teleport out with him. And then the X-Men, they escape, and they eventually find the Stranger, and at this point he says, "I am not going to join you, Magneto, but if you want, you can join me." And we find out the Stranger is actually not even from Earth, and he kind of says this like it's a no-duh. He says, "I've been telling you this whole time, I'm a stranger," meaning a stranger from another planet. And he tells everyone, I believe the X-Men are there at this point, he says that he goes from planet to planet looking for mutations to collect, basically for a space circus. And since Magneto was so insistent on the Stranger joining him, the Stranger decided to take Magneto and the Toad, who is touchingly loyal, I think is the phrase that he uses. So he just straight up kidnaps Magneto and Toad in front of everybody, and nobody seems to really care that much. Professor X is right there and says, "You're taking him into outer space, aren't you?" And the Stranger's like, "Yep, that's what I'm doing." So he takes Magneto and the Toad, and earlier he actually turned Mastermind into a statue. Professor X even says later, Mastermind is still alive, he's just, his molecules have been rearranged, and so now he's a statue. And I have no idea when Mastermind is going to be reverted back into his human form. For that matter, I don't know when Magneto and Toad return to Earth. But this is a huge issue for this series. This pretty drastically changes the status quo of the series, because we had about 4 issues in a row where the Brotherhood were the arch enemies of the X-Men, and now the Brotherhood has been completely wiped out. Mastermind was turned into a statue, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch have finally had enough with Magneto, and they decide they are not going to serve him anymore, and that was before Magneto was taken into outer space, and then Magneto and Toad are taken into outer space, so no more Brotherhood. So this seems like this would be like the end of Season 1 for the X-Men. Like, the big Season 1 threat has been eliminated, so what new threats are they going to face in the next season? And it's kind of interesting, kind of exciting, because you're very interested in seeing what direction the series is going to take next, and if you've already read past issue 11, then you know that from this point forward it kind of goes downhill, at least for a little while. There are a few more characters who will be introduced after issue 11 who are pretty interesting. The next villain that they face in next issue is one who sticks around for a long time to come, but after the Brotherhood is dismantled by the Stranger, things don't look as interesting for the X-Men. Their villains that they face aren't as interesting either visually or just their characters aren't very interesting. And I won't say that the members of the Brotherhood were very compelling characters. Some of them were pretty one-dimensional, but like I said before, I actually liked the team dynamic of the Brotherhood. I thought that we could have seen more of them. I think it might have been better if they hadn't bunched all of their appearances together in one 4-issue stretch. If they had kind of spread it out a little bit, have a Brotherhood appearance, then you could have the first appearance of Kazar, then have a Brotherhood appearance, and then you can have, I don't know, an issue with Eunice the Untouchable without the Brotherhood. You could do stuff like that instead of having all of your Brotherhood appearances in one batch and then have 3 or 4 issues without the Brotherhood and then getting rid of the Brotherhood. I think that you could have made this team last a little longer if you had done that. Maybe they weren't interested in doing that because in the next issue we're going to have a new art team. Jack Kirby is still going to be on the book a little bit, but he's not going to be doing all of the heavy lifting on art. Starting in the next issue, we're going to have Alex Toth doing some of the penciling. So I'm wondering if Jack Kirby was saying, okay, I want to kind of send off the Brotherhood since I helped create these guys, and I want to kind of give them their farewell as I start to prepare to leave this book. I don't know if that was what was going on. I know that some artists have done that before, where they help create a character and they don't really want someone else working on that character, so they kind of give them a send-off whenever they leave a book. I don't know if Jack Kirby was thinking that. I don't know if he had that much invested in the Brotherhood or not, or maybe they were thinking, we need to shake things up, we need to try and boost sales a little bit on this book, because I've mentioned this before, but the reason that they put X-Men on hiatus for about 5 years, much later down the line, was because of low sales, and then they brought it back, allegedly because sales were starting to increase right when they canceled it, and I'll talk about that more whenever I get on into the 60s in issues. But right now, this could be construed as one of the earliest versions of them trying to shake things up and get readers interested because they're doing something new and different. Or maybe they were just tired of the Brotherhood showing up and they wanted to do some different villains. But anyway, this is a very interesting issue if you are tracking where the series is going in terms of like first appearances and stuff, because the Brotherhood, they're pretty much gone for a while. I think the next time that we see any version of the Brotherhood of Mutants, it's going to be 1980. So this is like 65 or 66. It's going to be a while before we see the Brotherhood of Mutants again. I know that Magneto, he will show up again in this series, even before the Giant Size X-Men in 1975. We will see Magneto again. We won't see Toad in this series for a very long time to come. I believe he will come back either in Avengers or Champions or Defenders, one of those books, or something like that I haven't read. And then Mastermind, he comes back in the Dark Phoenix saga, and if I'm not mistaken, whichever book it is where Magneto is turned into a baby and then turned back into an adult, I believe that Mastermind was also turned into a baby. I'm not for sure, but I think he was. So he comes back in either Defenders or Champions, and he must have been turned back into a human off-screen, because that does not happen in the X-Men book. Although I think it would be kind of funny if Mastermind was just a statue in the X-Men's basement, and then anytime a new student comes along, they say, what's that over there? And Professor X says, oh, don't worry about it. He was one of our enemies. I think that'd be kind of funny, but they obviously didn't go in that direction, because the last we see the statue of Mastermind, he's at the mansion. But anyway, as far as I know, Mastermind does not get turned back into a human in the X-Men series. I could be off, but I don't think I am. So anyway, that's about all that I have to say for this issue. Really kind of a huge turning point for the X-Men. We do get to see a couple of instances of Jean waxing poetic about how much she loves Scott and how she wishes that he felt the same about her. We don't actually get to see Scott thinking about Jean in that way in this issue, but we know that he does feel that way. And also we get a little bit of human-mutant interactions here. The last time that we had any real interactions between humans and mutants and the bigotry and all that was back in the Eunice the Untouchable first appearance, where Beast encountered an angry mob. Here, it's not that bad. The cops, after hearing reports of the stranger walking on air, Cyclops, wearing his ruby quartz glasses, he goes up to him and says, hey, could you describe this guy for me? And they're like, you look suspicious. Why don't you take those sunglasses off? And he's screaming, no, don't make me do it. And then when they try and get his sunglasses off, his mutant powers activate, and they're not attacking him, but one of the cops does pull a gun, and as he's pulling the gun, he says, this must be Cyclops. This is why he didn't want his glasses taken off. And so they're not really against the X-Men. They're not like trying to arrest Cyclops for being a mutant or anything like that, but it does seem like they're a little bit more wary of the X-Men than they have been in the past. In issue 2, when the X-Men fought the Vanisher, the X-Men were celebrities. Here, they're not quite celebrities, but they're also not feared and hated by a world they're sworn to protect, at least in this issue. Later on in the issue, when the police come out of nowhere, and they say, "Hey, X-Men, we want to talk to you for a minute," and Professor X is like, "You guys have to stall them. They can't see me here with you, or my secret identity will be ruined." And so, they're kind of, it's a weird balance between where the X-Men are at now, where they have a very strained relationship with law and order, and where they were in the first 10 issues or so, where they more or less had an okay relationship with humanity at large. So that was kind of interesting to see. But anyway, next issue, we will get to see the X-Men face off against the Juggernaut. It's going to be really exciting. One of my favorite villains that the X-Men fight in the first 60 or so issues. So anyway, tune in for that. And in the meantime, consider this issue examined.